y'all, I'm Dan Hamilton, Marine Corps veteran and host of the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, the Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and our dedicated staff at the Texas Veterans Land Board. Here on the Next Gen Warrior Show, we are proud to promote the success stories and the achievements of veterans after they take off the uniform. We're proud to have on veterans like John Register to talk about overcoming adversity and how to continue to lead and serve in your community after you do take off the uniform, after you get that DD-214 and return home and figure out how to transition back into the civilian community. John, I believe you're joining us from Colorado today. It's great to have you on the program. How are you?
Dan, wow, thank you so much for allowing me to come on. And I'm so looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have today. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Thank you for your service. And yeah, that DD-214 is a good thing to get.
It really is. It feels like a ticket to freedom, but it's also opens up a whole different set of challenges, I think, for veterans. And before we get into some of the challenges that you faced after going through an amputation, tell us a little bit about your military service.
I got in for very selfish reasons. I was a track and field athlete, University of Arkansas, 4-time track and field All-American, went to the Olympic trials in 1988, and I still wanted to run track. I still wanted to continue. Army had a world-class athlete program. And this athlete program allowed soldier athletes to train for 2 or 3 years prior to the next Olympic Games, as long as you were selected by your national governing sports body. And so mine was track and field. And I wound up getting into the military for that. Wasn't a guarantee for me to make the program, but I did finally make that program. But on the way, where it shifted for me was walking across the parade field after basic training, the graduation in South Carolina at Fort Jackson. And as I was walking across the parade field, it clicked for me. And the click was that there have been so many people that had walked on this path before me to protect the freedoms that I was enjoying. And I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before until, I guess, going through basic training with my brothers and sisters in basic, and just understanding what that really meant. That the freedoms that I have are, somebody had to fight for that, to demand for that, right? To protect our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So we usually look at the foreign piece. We don't look at the domestic piece so much, right? We don't really look at the protecting the Constitution. So what is that? It began me looking and rereading that to the oath that I took. And I think we just kind of say those words. We really don't dive deep into it. So I was in hook, line, and sinker because I understood, having traveled a little bit internationally at that point, knowing that we have different freedoms here than other people have around the world, and those freedoms should be protected.
Yeah. Was the military, was the Army, was that your primary goal? Was that something when you were 16, 17, 18 that you went, hey, that is the path that I want to take? Or were you really set on being an athlete and trying to run competitively?
Yeah, there were two things I was thinking about at that point, like at 16. One was were girls.
Fair enough.
No, I was an athlete, and I was also a musician. So I was kind of looking at both of those two paths. I wasn't thinking anything about the military. Now, I had seen, which would come up later for me during service, some of my family members had served, right? So I had 2 uncles that served in World War II, one in the Navy and one in the Army. And so I kind of understood it from their service, and some that had come through even in the Korean War. So I saw those pictures of them in their uniforms, their military uniforms, on the shelf, and that would impact me a little bit later on in life, but not necessarily to say I want to sign up, protect our country. I didn't really know about that. Most of the folks I went through basic training, they were going through something else too, right? Some were trying to leave a bad situation that they were in, and others were trying to get school, and so it really wasn't to sign up for it was all about selfish reasons, really, right? And then we get in, and there becomes this click moment, right? This moment that we understand that this is something greater than ourselves. And I think that's the turn for many people that go through basic or, become an officer. We start to understand that there's something greater. And then that's when the service really begins. But for the most part, I think we're all just trying to get in there running from something or running to something, right?
Yeah.
But I think, Dan, when go ahead.
Yeah. Can I ask you about one thing that you mentioned that was that running to something or running from something, and you were a runner and you were somebody who was a passionate athlete. And I think it's always great when I talk to veterans, I tell them, try to find something you can do either for a career or to serve, and then bring your passion along with you. And for you to be able to match up these two things that you love, which was serving your country and being an athlete, can you tell us what that process was like, what the training was like, and what it was like being in that world-class athlete program?
So the training, I'll go back to Arkansas, because here's the mindset of the Razorbacks at that time. I come in as a redshirt freshman. And so my first year of running, real full year of running, is like 84 to 85. So in 84 is the Olympic Games. We had a couple of athletes that were on the Razorback team that made the Olympic Games. So when they came back, their mindset was not to win a conference championship. Their mindset was not to win a national championship. Their mindset was getting back to the Olympics again. So that's what came into the mindset of the entire team. We had to elevate to that standard that they had already seen and were bringing back. So I'd say that because when we shift into the next, that's what I have going into basic training, because I want to be this world-class athlete, and I see this as a pathway forward. So when I'm in and all these, drill sergeants trying to yell at you and stuff, my brain was already way ahead of that, right? I was so far gone that that wasn't going to really scare me. They had to get rid of, they had to take care of some of the other folks that were running when they gas you, right? When the gas comes out of the gas chamber, everybody's coming out, snot out, and everything. You can't breathe. So then they do one more in bivouac, right? They gas you again. So I just looked at which way the wind was blowing, and I just walked the other side, and all these privates are running down the bend, and drill sergeants having to chase folks down. And so one drill sergeant is right next to me and says, yeah, you're a little different. He said, you need to go down there.
You're thinking differently.
I'm thinking a little differently. I said, well, the wind's blowing that way, drill sergeant. I think I'd be up here. I'll be upwind. So, but that was it, right? I had fun in basic, but I also saw the leadership skills elevate to help people. And they pulled me in to help some people that were struggling with the APFT, the physical test, to help get them their push-ups well, or their sit-ups well. So even in that, I was starting to elevate kind of as a leader. And then you get fired, right? Because you got to go through that process too. Being the squad leader, you got fired. You have to experience all that things. So it taught me a lot. The real elevation in the military was when I was called up to Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. That's when it got, kind of playing soldier, kind of on my own path to, it just got real quick, right? All the training has to kick back in. And I didn't want to go, right? I was a three-time loser at that point, because there was an op order that had come out that said, if you are in a unit that's you're working the slot for the unit, sure, you were non-deployable. That was the first line. The second one is if you were in school, you were non-deployable. That was the second. The third one was if you were on orders to PCS or change stations, you were not deployable. I had all three of those. I was in PLDC. I was working a job at a MARS station that was for two specialists, and I was one E4. And we had two excess sergeants, E5s, that were working there. And then third, I was ready to transfer to Presidio San Francisco. And so I got picked to go because I wasn't there to defend myself.
Yeah.
But I went there, Dan, and what an amazing experience it was. I wouldn't want to do it again. And I pray for those that are over there, that just come back from Iraq, Afghanistan now. Wouldn't want to do it again, but the experience there just opened my aperture up to a lot of different things, right? I was getting reports from home of what they were showing on the news, which was not aligning to what I was seeing on the battlefield. That was one thing. So what story, what narrative are they listening to back home? Where's that narrative coming to? And it really began to giving me a point of question of what was factual, of what I was actually seeing versus what was being reported. And why was that being manipulated for that? So that I started thinking about it very different. Why is it only one source of information that's coming? So that was one thing. I think the second thing was that people are people. And it's kind of like these governments that fight, and people, they show up for each other. So when I'm on the road and when I'm in my Humvee and someone comes with my vehicle that doesn't look like us, right? And I got my, I got my weapon.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are, approach slow, right? I don't know who I find out that, folks were just hungry because we had starved them out. Mm-hmm. And so you begin to see the effects of that and what warfare really is. Yeah. And then the third thing I learned is no one comes back home the same way. I don't care if you were injured, maimed, or whatever. Our mental capacity when we come back home, if you have served, no one comes back home the same way. My wife said I got home physically on like in May or whatever the next year, but I didn't come home for another 8 months in my mental capacity. I was still setting perimeters up around the house, kind of checking the doors, making sure that, looking under cars. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. Mm. So, it just gets ingrained because we're at such a high level of protection, of making sure that every single thing we do, even before we go into chow hall, right? We're right. empty your mag before you go in. And one time you hear a fire, right? Like, pow! Why were you even loaded in the first place? Number one, yeah. Who gave that order? So, so I just learned a lot through through Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then I was able to take those lessons back onto the track. It gave me a deeper appreciation of that world-class athlete program. And how I could show up in a greater capacity as a soldier athlete.
That's what I was going to ask you, was how being overseas, did it change your perspective of what you wanted to do after you were deployed, or did it change the goals that you had, or maybe did it change how you approached them?
It did change me. I'm not sure. I know before I went to the Gulf War, I wanted to be a lifer in the military. And I think that happened when I was walking across the parade field because I took the officer selection battery test, scored very well on it. But I kept that in my back pocket because, I began to compartmentalize. Okay, I'm going to finish this thing up here, then I'll do this thing. So I was kind of beginning to put things in compartments. And so I wanted to do my best to try to, make the 1996 Olympic team. That was my aim. That was my trajectory, right? So after that, Desert Shield, Desert Storm came up, the 1992 Barcelona games, I couldn't run the high hurdles, which was my discipline, any longer because the sand took it out of my legs. Yeah. So I switched to the 400-meter hurdles and finished up 17th in my first try in those games. So 56 people qualified. I finished up 17th. You got to be the top 3. So I was on my way. I'd made some really great progress. So I said, I'm going to re-up for another 4 years, see if I can get this thing licked for 1996 and compete on home soil in Atlanta. And then I was going to go to officer candidate school and just become, do 20 years there, possibly become a light colonel, retire, and then come back in and work the same job as a civilian, making twice the money I was making as a soldier. and that was my, and then hit retirement. So that was my vision. And then May 17th, 1994 hit.
Before we get to that day, can you talk to us about something I'm interested in, and I want our audience to absorb is excellence and what it takes to be somebody who finishes in the top 17 of anything, regardless if it's being an athlete or if it's in sales or if it's running a business or whatever it may be, public policy. Can you talk about the mindset and the discipline that it takes to be that excellent at one thing? And let me ask you this too. Did you always enjoy it, or was it real hard work?
Yeah, no, most of the time I enjoyed it, right? They're tough days. They're always tough days. I call them now in the learning process +1 days. So a +1 day is the day that you're going to show up that your competitor will not. If it's raining outside and you gotta do a practice session, do you bail on the practice session because of a little rain, or do you go out and you get it done? What that does when you line up on the starting line is if it's a little misty or raining out there and you got 8, 9 guys in the lanes and they're all ticked off because we got to run the rain, I can say, oh my gosh, I love training the rain. We just did 2 sessions last week in this. I love this stuff. Let it pour. I hope it comes down even harder. Right. So now you've just kind of psyched all them out. Like, this guy trains in the rain. Who is he? What level is he at? So we can be, and I call those +1 days. They add up. They begin to add up. I think the second thing is our competitive advantage. What is it that was, either in our military career that gives us a little bit of an edge over somebody else? And we use that to our advantage, to best the crowd. It does take a mindset that's different. And I call it, I don't call it, it's Dr. Siegel calls it. He runs the Mindsight Institute. And I say it's going from a mindset to a mindsight. So from where we are right now in this one moment in time to, can I see a vision of a better, not life, but a better existence of myself in the future? And it's so crystal clear that no one can tell me that it won't happen.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me jumping in, because the one thing that hit me was when you said in 1992, you had kind of the foresight, the mindsight to see in 4 years that this is where I need to go. I need to be in Atlanta. I want to run there. And to me, that's really critical, I think, for veterans after they get out of the military, where you don't necessarily have that easy trajectory, because you don't have somebody waking you up. You don't have somebody making you do your MCIs, I guess is what we had in learning, doing your PT test, and then you get your rank. And then after that, you stay in your grade for a certain period of time. Then you go to this school, and there is sort of a trajectory to how you get to where you want to go. But I think specifically to go back to your mindset of 4 years, how did you stay on that track, over that period of time? Or how did you even say to yourself, I can stick to this for 4 years, to continue to get up, to train in the rain, even when it's uncomfortable, and just to have that discipline?
Yeah, that's it. That's the shift, right? It's how married are you to that goal? Mm-hmm. And so I think what I tell veterans now, before they're getting out in the transition moment, don't wait for people to help you in the transition moment. Be proactive in that. If you know you're going to get out and there's something else you want to do, begin to align yourself with those opportunities while you're still in. That's what I learned, at Arkansas. That's what I learned when I was in the military. As people are transitioning out, and even in sport, right? When people are trying to transition out, they don't know how to do it because they haven't done it. They're afraid of the unknown of what's going to be happening next. But if you have a plan in place, you can just execute against that plan. Anytime we were in battle or going into a battle, we always had, a frag order, right? We did everything ahead of time, kind of rehearsed scenarios. We weren't going to get all the scenarios right every single time. So there are going to be ebbs and flows of it, but we knew where we're going. And so that's where we have to do the same thing in our transitions. We have to know where we're going. And even if we don't, we've got to put a marker out there somewhere, or else we're just going to be kind of in the wind. So if you know that, you were kicking down doors, and, what are some of those skill sets that translate into a civilian life? And you can start preparing for that 4 years, 5 years out. What can you do now? So a classic point example, I wanted to go to officer candidate school, but also at the same time, I don't know if I'm going to make that or not. I got to get boarded for it. I put a secondary plan in place. So if I don't get that, I'm going to try to be the highest level enlisted person as well. So I started doing correspondence courses, because those help get my
score up,
points up, right? So as I was going through my AIT course, which was 31 Charlie, a single channel radio operator, I got the correspondence course that was 31 Charlie. So I started doing the course. So when I finished correspondence course, when I finished 31 Charlie school, I also finished the correspondence course. So now I got that done, and I got this book that's done too. So I started doing all these things in parallel and at the same time. So I was getting double the learning at that time. And I think that's what we can do. We don't just wait for things to happen. We can be proactive of where we want to go. And it can always change. We can always change the future where we want it to be. So just put a target out there, even right now. And I think that helps.
So tell us about the fateful day that changed not only your military career, but your athletic career.
Yeah. So, I'm, like I said, we're on, the train, it's going really well. I'm about to go to officer candidate school. I was just boarded in Germany. I'm living there on TDY, temporary duty, back to the United States to run track. I'm about to get back on the Army's world-class athlete program, do my next, 3 years to try to make the 1996 team, 4-time All-American, twice been the Olympic trials, and life is good. Then on May 17th, 1994, at 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon, as I'm doing a shakeout on the track in Hays, Kansas, I'm running over the 400-meter hurdles, doing a practice session. I have a race the next day, and I'm approaching every one of these hurdles, which, if you don't know out there, the 400-meter hurdles is one time around the track over 10 obstacles spaced 35 meters apart, with a 45-meter run into the first hurdle and a 40-meter run off the last hurdle for the 400-meter race. I'm approaching every one of these hurdles at the speed of about 8.7 meters per second, which equates to about, some people say really fast, but it's about 19 miles an hour. About 19 miles an hour, 19.6 miles an hour. And I'm ambidextrous. I can take the hurdle with either leg. It doesn't really matter which leg I jump over, lead with. But when you set your race up, when I set my race up, I just want things to stay the same. So I led with my right leg all the way down the back stretch over the first 5 hurdles. So I'm practicing the first 3 hurdles, just kind of setting the race tempo and making sure I'm dialed in for the next day. But the wind's blowing hard in Hays, Kansas, and I'm having trouble with my steps. So 21 steps out of blocks the first hurdle, my right leg will lead. If I do 20 steps out of blocks the first hurdle, my left leg will lead. So I'm counting these steps in my head. 13 steps over the second hurdle, that means my right leg is leading. 14 steps, and my left leg is leading. So I get in the blocks, and with the wind blowing, I can't get anything consistent. It's like 21 steps, 22 steps the first hurdle, right leg, left leg leads. 13 steps, 14 steps, second hurdle, right leg, left leg leads again. I'm like, sometimes in hurdles, as in life, we just want things to stay the same. So I get in the blocks to do my one last proverbial pass, jump out the blocks, get 21 steps the first hurdle, right leg leads, I'm on. Second hurdle comes into view, 13 steps, right leg leads again, I'm on. Third hurdle comes into view, and that's when I felt that Kansas wind push against me again. But then I pushed back against that Kansas wind, and I thought that I can make the 13, but I was caught kind of in between. So I decided to, kind of downshift and then take the hurdle with my left leg. So off the right leg I go, cross the hurdle with my left leg, and when I land, I hear, and I, kind of sail. My body twists in the air. I see my left shin pass in front of my face, and my body hits the ground, and I bounce to a halt. I do a quick once on my body, my shoulder's okay, my waist is okay. When I see my knee, I see that my patella has risen 3 inches up my femur bone. My left leg is now canted across my right leg, with my foot touching the black surface of the track. And that stopped everything at that point. The pain hit, and it was just one of these nightmarish injuries, career-ending injuries. So not only my military career, my sports career, but also my military career, because 7 days later, we found out that the popliteal artery had been severed, and there was no blood flow going to the lower portion of my limb. And having come through Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm without a scratch, having been, combat veteran, now here I was laying in this hospital bed with a guy named Dr. Mullen saying, John, you got a tough choice to make. You can either keep your leg, use a walker or wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg. You can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life. And so what kind of choice is that? So I chose, because of the pain, my male deductive reason said, look, doc, if I can just get rid of this leg, I can get rid of this pain. And so he immediately goes into motion, because I say, I know it has to be amputated. And I wake up from that surgery, and I'm in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. And I wanted something to knock it out, right? So I saw the morphine drip button on the other side. I was too weak to roll over to press that button. I could see the nurse's aid station right outside my door. I thought I'd call out to them, but those tubes that have been down my throat, it made the sound to an audible, get their attention. So there I lay in that bed for the next 8 hours with my dangerous thoughts. Who am I now? What's my identity? Will my wife, Alice, still stay around? Will my son still see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the military? Can I support my family? I mean, my Olympic dreams are over. And at 8 o'clock, Dr. Mullins, he comes back in the room. He takes one look at me, sees I've done a 180-degree shift in my countenance. He immediately calls my wife, Alice, who they've told to go and get some rest, because she's been there by my bedside almost constantly, 24 hours. And he says, that the doctor and nurses said, I'll sleep the night. So she's over the local hotel trying to manage herself, John Jr., her mother-in-law, and she just found out at 7 o'clock that morning that the job she was working in West Memphis, Arkansas, as a certified nurse's aide has just fired her for being gone too long taking care of me. And so she comes running over, And her and Dr. Mullins get me out of the bed, put into a wheelchair, wheeled out to an inaccessible playground where I'm parked and kind of forced to watch my my son and my wife play on a swing set that's not too far away. And I lost it. It was the first time I ever felt in my life disabled.
Huh.
And so my wife sees me struggling. I'm heaving sobs, uncontrollably crying. And so she comes over and she says, what is wrong? And I began to articulate to her all of my fears I had the night before in the hospital. And that's when she said, you know what, John, we're going to get through this together. It's just our new normal. And when she spoke those words, it's just our new normal, I began to really, I started thinking again, right? She undergirded and stopped my downward spiral in that moment. And then I see John Jr. He jumps off the swing set because he sees mom and dad over there, hits the ground, comes running over yelling, hey, mom, dad, you see my big jump? Mom, dad, you see my big jump? And he jumps in between Alice and myself. And in that moment, I realized he has just validated me as his father. He's created his new normal. And that's what I had to do. So that's the whole shift, right? So now we have an injury point and we have a vision, the beginning of a vision that something can be better than the state I'm in right now. I haven't done anything. I'm not thinking about Paralympics. I don't even know about Paralympics. I don't know what's going to be next for me in the military. I don't know. I can't even see past, the next hour, let alone, what's next for me in my whole career. But I have this hope that begins to build on the inside of me, that something can be better. And I'm going to have to go down to some really dark days, but I still hold on to that, even though I got to go down even further and before I start coming back up. Things I didn't even know about, like phantom pain, recovery on the inside, outside wound, inside the body, outside the body, the mental state around that of the nerve endings trying to come back and trying to reach out to things that are no longer there from the amputation. A lot of things I had to go through and experience, other people, what their beliefs were for me, society beliefs, becoming a person with a disability, kind of the military, that before we have these warrior transition units and, Marine for Life, for example, the holistic approach, it wasn't like that, right? If you're a red block on the commander's deployment list, you're just kind of walking wounded. Yeah. You're out there. Yeah. You're gone, man. No one was putting a line of sight on you. So all that stuff was in my head about that, of what I would have to kind of go through and endure. So I had to prepare myself for that before I could think about anything else. Again, we're focusing in on the transition piece that has to happen. And we can allow it to happen to us, or we can lean into it and say, okay, how am I going to manage this situation, even though I know it's going to be really pretty tough.
Can I ask you? Yeah, I think so. Something that sticks out to me in all of this is that when you kind of broke down and you started to articulate the things that you were worried about to your wife, and that's like something that to me is so important for the veterans community to hear, and I think our community at large, because as you look across the landscape of America, you see a lot of people dealing with things like depression, anxiety, not feeling fulfilled, high rates of suicide among either the veterans community and our peers at large.
Yes.
But the one thing that I think we are slowly getting better about, at least in the veterans community, is talking about our pain, talking about our anguish, and talking about the things that are really affecting us. And because you did that, was that part of the healing process for you, where I think when you share something like that, when you share those vulnerabilities, when you share those fears, all of a sudden other people can help you carry that burden. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be you laying in that bed by yourself thinking, I need to do all of this. Now I've shared my burden, I've put it out there, and I can move forward after having that verbal conversation out loud.
The answer is yes. I believe, we're opening up because veterans kind of really hold things together. Yeah. I'm starting to share, leave it a little bit more about what happened in Desert Storm for me, because I really don't talk about that stuff too much either, kind of keep that private, because it did affect me in some ways. I also believe that I don't know in that moment if I could have articulated the way the way I'm saying it right now to you and the audience. I don't think I would have said it that way going through it. I think I was latching on to a hope that things would get better tomorrow than they are today.
Right.
And just holding on to that hope. I don't think all the other stuff, the processing of it, I think that takes time to go through it. But I also believe we can shorten that window of processing. I work with a fantastic organization now on their board with Boulder Crest. And part of one of the doctors they talk about is the post-traumatic growth versus the post-traumatic, stress. And so post-traumatic growth is trying to shorten that window of time of when a veteran can kind of get back to, now I won't say normalcy, but I've always framed it as the new normal mindset.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of work in that space on this new normal mindset. And so a lot of folks are sick and tired of the term the new normal, but really it's only because we haven't done the work in understanding what that actually means. That's my opinion. And so most people will say they're sick and tired of it because they can't do anything about it. Or they think they can't do anything about it. So we hear it come up, Daniel, as a past state of existence. I just can't wait till things get back to normal. So the way I articulate it is, well, if new is no prior point of reference,
right,
why are we trying to use old things to do something new and get a different result? That's the definition of insanity. Had I overcome the amputation of my left leg, is my realization, I'd have my leg back. I don't get my leg back. We don't get back those things that have been left off, or even yesterday, right? Take we're living in COVID example for right now. We don't get back pre-COVID.
Right.
Things have shifted. So we need to catch up to that, right? We need to accept, which I believe is in my presentation now, and as a speaker, I say that's the reckoning moment. I don't get that back. That's a reckoning. I have to come to that point and be okay with that, so I can actually have a foundation now to build upon for what's going to come next in my life.
When did you realize that you could still be a competitive athlete at an international level?
Much later. So I started swimming for physical therapy, right? I wanted something I could do that I could control, I could do as a ritual, because that's the second part of the normal. The normal is the everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. So I began to swim for physical therapy. And I got so fast in the water, excuse me, that I somehow messed up, fluked up, and made the Paralympic swim team. I couldn't have told you what
roll out of bed and you're an international athlete.
No, but but the process was still the same, right? The process was, okay, I got to get my body back in shape. I can't run. What else can I do? Well, okay, I used to swim when I was a young tyke. I learned how to swim. Let me go to the pool. So I got in the water. I could barely do a lap, the first time I got in. And then somebody saw me and said, hey, move your arm this way and kind of turn. And so they started working with me in the pool. I don't know. Now I can do 2 laps, right? And so I kept on doing that and said, let me set a goal on the marker. After 5 days, I'm going to be able to swim 5 laps, right? After 10 days, I'm going to be able to swim 10 laps. So I just started putting those benchmarks out there that were attainable for me. And that kept on. And so by the time I transitioned out of the military, now I was swimming like a half a mile a day. So my body was getting stronger, and I was flushing those medications out of me. And I was giving myself something else to do, because again, they weren't looking at me because I was walking wounded. So I had time to go over there and started working on my mental state. That's why I believe sports is such a conduit to regaining the mindset that we once had, and not thinking about as something that's different, but it brings us back fast to say we're still the same person. I'm just going to elevate now from this plateau to grow. That's the destination of the new normal mindset. It's not a destination, it's a plateau by which we grow. So I had those things, and I kept putting benchmarks on the wall. And Dan, I didn't even know I made the swim team. I actually left before the team was announced, because I needed one.
You're like, oh, I'll just continue on with my day.
Yeah. So I was in Indianapolis. I needed 106 flat, I believe it was, to make the 100-meter freestyle and make the team, or at least give myself a shot. I swam 106.01, which was I was so over the moon with that, because I had started at like 117. And over the course of like these little 18 months, I come all the way down to almost making the standard for another games. So I left. I was so happy, about to eat some cake and everything. I get a call on Monday morning from one of our coaches, and he says, why did you leave before the team was announced? I said, well, I didn't make it. So, but thanks, I appreciate you checking back in.
Yeah.
He said, well, idiot, what happened is you didn't make the time. You were 100th of a second off the time for the freestyle. However, in swimming in the freestyle, when you do the flip turn to the other side, there's a touch pad that's there. And you were under the time for the Paralympic standard when you flip turn and hit the touch pad. So you are bona fide on the team for the 50-meter freestyle. I said, you're kidding me. It's like running a 100-meter dash and you got 50 meters and they give you an award for running 50 meters of the 100-meter dash. I'm like, this is amazing. So I said, you're telling me I'm on the Paralympic team? And so I go to Atlanta. It's the most amazing experience that I've had, because now I see this whole kind of quote unquote disability community. I've never seen a group like this before. And I'm questioning, do I belong in this community? Am I here? Am I imposter? So I got all these things that are hitting me right now in my brain capacity, because again, society has told us that people with disabilities need to be discarded. We look at them differently. And here's my example for that. When I was building out the Paralympic military sport program for the United States Olympic Committee, long after this piece, we have the burn unit that's down at Brooke Army Medical Center. When you look at movies and you have all these service members that have been burned over their bodies, most of the time we see horror movies, we're always looking at a person that's disfigured.
Sure.
In their face, in their features, in their mindset, their mental capacity. And so that drives this narrative that people with disabilities need to be feared, because we never see them as the hero or the heroine. Right. I think one Inferno with, The Rock, right? That was, or whatever that movie was, where he was an amputee, hopping around. But anyway, that's what's in our psyche. And what else that began to show me, what else in society do we actually allow in that we believe? Maybe it's with people of color. How do we show up on television? How do we show up when and take it to the military, right? Who do we usually see waving the flag, jumping into the arms of their parent when their soldier comes back home? It's usually not Hispanics and African Americans, right? So the only patriots that we really see out there, that the narrative is, it doesn't look like me.
Yeah. But
I go back to the shelf of those World War II veterans that were my uncles that came back and didn't get the opportunities for the veterans programs that were out there, the land, the schooling, the education, because they weren't allowed to go to that. So you can fight for your country. When you come back home to your country won't fight for you. Yeah. That's what Muhammad Ali said about Vietnam, right? So there's this dichotomy that's going on. So when I talk about patriotism to my comrades and colleagues out there, I say, who's the greater patriot? Those that fought and were treated horribly when they got back home and they still continue to fight for a more perfect union? Or those that just came home and were able to have everything just kind of given to them because of their thank you for your service? So that's a whole narrative that was going into my psyche. And how could I actually help in that space? What would be my role to kind of celebrate all of our veteran population and make sure they have access to the great to what everybody gets, right? When they come back home, because I think everyone should be honored for the service that they have given to our nation.
Absolutely. So tell us about competing in the Paralympics and rising to the ranks, getting on the podium, and what that entire day was like for you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm at the Paralympic Games in 1996. I'm watching this guy on closed circuit television. He's a long jumper. Remember at Arkansas, I jumped like 27 feet. So that was one of my long jumps. I was like, this guy intrigued me. He has one leg. He's jumping on the long jump runway. I am dialed in on this guy. He jumps, his leg flies off in mid-flight. He hits the sand. The whole crowd does a Macaulay Culkin Home Alone moment, like, whoa. And then this guy turns back to long jumper, the official, and says, hey, where are you going to measure my jump from? Right here, my artificial leg over there. So that began the shifting in me to say, oh my gosh, you can run and jump on artificial limbs? Why am I in this swim venue when I need to be in the track and field venue? It shifted my perspective. As veterans, we always have to shift our perspective. Nothing when the frag order comes and we go out to do the operation is ever going to be the same thing, right? So that's why we do a debrief on the other side. So I started running. I started running for to try to make this team. I could see myself doing this, and no one could tell me any different. So I started running on this artificial leg, and it took me like 3 years to figure it out, and then to start jumping on it. And then lo and behold, I make my second Paralympic team, this time in track and field. And I know track and field. I have done track and field. So I just need to know how to run and jump. That's all I had to figure out how to do that. But I know track and field. So I brought all of that acumen that I learned from Arkansas, from being in the military, from having some of the world's best coaches, and I put that all onto the track for that long jump day. So I ran the 100 meters, the 200 meters, and then my long jump was where I thought I could probably do some damage. So on that day, you get 6 jumps, and at the end of the day, I had to beat the world record holder and the current 2-time Paralympic champion. And another lesson: no one gives that stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell
it. They're competing hard. Yeah, they're not. They don't want to leave the throne. They don't want to take off the crowd.
That's right. And that shows us a lesson right within inside of power. Power doesn't yield itself. Mm-hmm. You have to take power. So in order for me to beat him, I have to go out and actually physically beat him on that day, because he's not going to roll over and just give it to me, right? He's going to try to defend it. So his world record was 5 meters 42 at the time. I can't do the math on the long jump. I think it's like 17.9 or 17.8.5. So I get on the long jump runway, and I'm kind of going right before him, and I jump 5 meters 41. So he has to jump a world record or beat his world. He has to tie his world record or beat his world record in order to beat me. So I'm pressing this guy to the limit, right? Yeah. And he winds up doing it, right? He winds up jumping 557, and my 541. So he's got me by about 4 inches there. So as we're on the medal podium, we give each other a big hug. I mean, because we know we're the only two in the competition that we are dialed in. We are fighting like
tooth
dogs.
And nail, huh?
Yeah, tooth and nail. Every jump, we're looking at each other, staring each other down, trying to, I'm going, because power doesn't yield itself. You got to take it. You got to physically fight for it. So we go on the stand, the medal stand. His name is Lucas Christen. He's from Switzerland. So Lucas is up there. We get our medals, kind of hold it for the, I don't really hold it, to put it around my neck. I'm smiling, cheesing, looking at him, like, dang, I wish I could have another jump. I'm thinking all these kind of things right here. I'm also thinking about, a lot of people that helped support me to get to this one moment. And then the moment hit me, kind of like when I walked across that parade field and I got it. The moment hit me when they started putting the American flag there and the Swiss flag, and then the Sweden flag, because the guy that got third is from Sweden. And I heard the entire crowd go silent. No one was moving. And everybody was honoring and respecting the competition, the competitors that were up there in that moment. But it was more than that, because there are cameras on you as well. And so now in this moment, they're actually celebrating humanity. Yeah. That we can come from different backgrounds and walks in life and countries and compete on this battlefield of sport. And that's when I realized how so small I was in this world, yet how much impact one person make, even in that smallness. And I think that was the realization when when I saw the flag going up in my honor of making that jump. That's when the tear fell, right? It's like you realize you're part of this global community, and everybody is pausing for you in this one moment to celebrate, to honor this part of humanity. That's an irreplaceable moment. Not too many people get a chance to experience it to that level. You can feel it. I felt it coming through my body, right? This connection to everyone that was in that stadium, to everyone who helped support me. It was like what's that Avatar, the Avatar movie?
Yeah.
With where everybody's connected with the trees and everything. It was like that was running through my body.
Like a little tail roots everywhere. Yeah.
Roots everywhere. Right, roots everywhere. And it was so that's that again, that was a moment that shifted me to say, I'm a global citizen. Yes, I'm an American, and yes, I have the flag, but I'm a part of this global community. Yeah. And I think we don't, living in America, I don't think we understand that to the degree, because I think they get it a little bit more in Europe, because when you're in Europe, if you go 3 hours in one other direction, you're in a different country.
In a different country, yeah, exactly.
Right.
We're
You go 3 hours in one
here, especially here in Texas. I mean, it feels like a country itself sometimes.
Absolutely. So you know, I love messing with Texans, you know, because it's so fun. Because you guys have the second largest landmass of the. They're like, what do you mean? Forget about Alaska, right? So, so yeah, it is that the awareness of how we show up in the world, and you know, sometimes I think we think that if we just offer like aids to another country or something, right, that's going to solve a problem. Yeah. When in fact, if I just, you know, take all the t-shirts, because, you know, the last Super Bowl team that lost, we dump all the t-shirts that we had printed up over in a different country. Well, that just destroyed the economy for that woman over there that was selling t-shirts and making them for their economy. We just flooded the market with stuff that we didn't want. And now she can't sell her wares and goods. So it sends that economy spinning out a cycle. So we got to show up and ask what is needed, and then say, how do we support you in growing that from, you know, outside in or inside out. So coming up as good partners for sure. So that got me really, you know, the State Department stuff and all this. So it's a lot of things. I just think about things kind of weird like that, you know.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, and you referred to the State Department there, because outside of your military service, outside of you being a Paralympic, an Olympian, you also are a writer, and you're also a motivational speaker. So tell us a little bit about your day-to-day and how you balance kind of the different competing desires that you have in your professional life now that you've taken off the uniform.
Yeah, thanks for that. You know, I look at it, I heard this term used by Dr. Nito Cobain, who comes in from Cuba with $50 in his pocket, starts High Point University in North Carolina. And this guy is like incredible. And he talks about intentional congruence. So one part of our life that connects with another part of our life, that connects with another part of our life. And so as long as that fits in that circle of congruence, I will do it. If it's outside that circle of congruence, I won't. So for example, working with the State Department, or working in my business of Inspired Communications International to try to help foster people to have the courage to make the jumps in their own life, those two are congruent for me. Because when I talk about disabilities or veteran programs with the State Department, I'm talking usually to folks that are trying to figure out ways to expand disabilities in the marketplace. And the biggest thing that holds them back is the mindset shift they need to actually embrace and value people with disabilities. Yeah. You can put as many jobs you want to out there, but if your HR department doesn't value the hiring of them, people, they don't do it. So I'm constantly trying to shift that. So as long as it's in that lane of trying to help people make the courageous acts in their life, then I push in that space. And I'm led by, you know, one of our mantras is when truth outweighs fear, we commit to a courageous life. And that all comes down to, it seems like a simple statement, but it's very hard. The point that the reason it's hard is because we have competing interests, like you said, or competing ideas, competing people that are vying to say that, no, that's not right. This is what's really right. So as soon as you find out what that truth is for you, and I'm not talking about truth is my truth is your truth, or your truth, you know, I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is an absolute that, you know, 2 + 2 is equaling 4, right? And somebody else is saying, no, it doesn't equal 4. So I'm saying, when you get it, when you know that this is the right thing to do, will you actually do it? You have the vision, you know, this is the way to go. This is 100%, I'm locked into this. But then there's a competing force out there that says, nah, that's not really the right way. So that might be society saying disfigurement of people with disabilities is who we should be putting forward to scare people. Halloween, the mask, and all those things that we put on during Halloween that are disfigurements, the mask that we wear, warts for witches, and all these things that we have, all those things to make us afraid. So I have to say, what's driving my fears? And if it's going to compete against the circle I run in with other people, or what I believed in society, and I know I got to go a different way, will I make the jump? Or am I going to bow to the pervasive demand of all these other individuals that say, you know what, we're going to ostracize you for making that jump?
Yeah.
Can you live in the isolation if you make the decision and the other folks don't go with you? That's when it gets hard. That's when it gets real. Conformity. You know, we talk about rights over here a lot, right? Our don't infringe upon my rights. Well, with a global perspective, you begin to understand that the freedoms that we protect here, they're not all the way around the world. And we might be talking about something with COVID, but we haven't lived through Ebola, right? So we don't see that because it hasn't touched our shores.
Right.
Right. And so now, even I don't think even 9/11 brought us all together. I think the last time we had resilience was actually World War II.
Yeah.
Because 9/11 was East Coast.
Yeah.
Right. It may have triggered some people, you know, west of the Mississippi to kind of put on the uniform, but that was East Coast thing, and the Pentagon, and then the plane that hit down in Pennsylvania. So it didn't bring us, maybe for a day or two it brought us together, like maybe as a nation, but it really didn't solidify us. It really started separating us. I think it was the first part of our separation. World War II, that was a national move. We had factories that started building to support the war effort. We all felt like we were in it together. And then afterward, before the Great Depression hit, right, we were talking about 5 years of trying to figure out how to get food on the table in America. So we haven't been hit like that. And so now we're seeing how we're showing up in this current environment, and how and not others. How am I showing up? So that's the work I do as Inspired Communications International. So I say, what's my personal responsibility? And most people can't get that granular. So my granular was it was not my wife leaving me, right? That's not what I was afraid of. My afraid of was belonging and acceptance by her and by others. Am I still desirable to my wife? Can I get that level of belonging? If I'm isolated and I know to go this way, if I know to do this thing and this is the right thing to do, because I've seen the data and the data shares this, and my other friends are saying, don't go that way. Am I going to be true to that? Because I want to belong, and I'll fight tooth and nail to belong. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being on the program with us today and really walking us through your journey of overcoming adversity, being on the top of the mountain, and then being in immense pain, and how you were able to get through those difficult times. And the way that you processed it, I think, was so just incredibly helpful. And I think we can all learn from the ways that you attacked the trauma. And as you talked about, you pursued post-traumatic growth, and appreciate you also reaching out into the community today and being an advocate for veterans as well as those with disabilities. And before we close out today, I just wanted to see if there was one thing maybe we didn't get to hit on today that you'd like to leave our audience with.
Yeah, thanks. I think, you know, the one thing is that, you know, the work can be tough, but the work is also fun, right? It's when we get to this, what I call kind of this rebirth side, we have to unlearn to learn. And then once we've done the work, like, you know, the World War II folks and, you know, the Great Depression, 5 years of that stuff, they built up a resolve. They were resolute in who they are. And that's what we're looking for right now. We're trying to become more resolute in who we are in our country. And I believe that each one of us can make a dent in that. Each life is valuable for us. So we always talk about in our company is to go forth, inspire your world. Why? Because go is our command, forth is our direction, inspire is our vocation, because only you can do it, and world, it's your sphere of influence. So folks can follow me at johnregister.com. And thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you once more, and thank our audience for joining. You, as John said, you can see him learn more about his work at johnregister.com. We'll be back here again next week on the Next Gen Warrior Show. If you know a veteran, share the podcast with them. You can find us on all your favorite podcasting platforms, as well as on social media, where weekly we seek to inspire the veterans community, close the civilian-veteran divide, and encourage veterans to continue to lead and serve after leaving the military. Until then, we'll talk to you next week.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior podcast.